Well, hey, thanks so much for checking out the Selah Leaders podcast. My name is Nick Newman. It's an honor to be with you today. Thanks so much for checking out this episode. Hey, if you follow the Selah Leaders podcast, do us a favor. Like, comment, subscribe, share, send it to your cousin, your neighbor, and even your grandma. We're honored that you're here today. I'm here with my co-host.
Co-host works too. Podcast guide.
Podcast guide. Yeah, I mean, we might just change titles. Right, which, only treasures you're getting are in heaven.
It's true.
So, but man, honored and super excited to be here with you today.
Yeah, man, it's cool. I mean, it's funny. I feel like so much time passes between podcast episodes. The reality is, it's only been 3 weeks since we filmed our last one, but It feels like it's been 3 months. There's just so many different things that have been going on in both of our lives and in the life of our church. And it's cool to be able to jump back into this and talk some more leadership principles with you.
Come on. It's been a really interesting season. And I think, in our next episode, we'll dive into how to navigate crisis.
Yeah.
And kind of what that looks like. There have been a few crises.
Yeah.
Crises.
Yeah.
But Christ is good. Even in the midst of those. And we've kind of navigated some crazy things as leaders over the last couple of months. And I think that one of the tensions that we find ourselves in leadership quite often is, can we actually be real as a leader?
Yeah.
I know I've talked to so many people that talk about how leadership is lonely.
Yeah.
And it's lonely at the top, as they say. And I think sometimes we struggle with who can we be real with, who can we not. And then I think we're in this season in the world where the world craves authenticity.
Yeah. Well, I think too, so many people from the outside looking in often will put a leader on a pedestal or something like that. And they don't realize that leaders have the same flaws as anybody else. We all have flaws. We all have unique ways that God has gifted and equipped and designed each of us. And, with that means that, hey, yeah, there's things that we're all struggling with too as leaders. How do we ultimately be transparent, but not overshare and not take things too far in some cases?
Yeah.
We're going to talk about some of that today.
Yeah, and I think the big principle that I've lived by for a couple of years is everyone deserves your authenticity, but not everyone can handle your transparency. And I think there's a big difference between authenticity and transparency.
I'm eager to unpack that, yeah.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest things is when something is transparent, you can see completely through it. And whenever you are completely see-through as a leader, I think it becomes complicated because what people see in a moment is something that you're still working out in a process.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times I think leaders go to complete transparency of everything they have going on, which is different than authenticity. Authenticity is me being real. I can be real and not share everything that's going on in my life right now because I have the responsibility to be a leader.
Right.
And my responsibility to be a leader doesn't mean that I have to be fake. We're over at your house tonight, and when I walked in, you said, "Hey, how you doing?" And I looked at you and went, "Yeah, how you doing?" Right?
That's exactly what you did, yeah.
Because I can lie to you,
Yeah,
and say I'm good.
yeah,
I can decide no, I don't want to talk about it, and I can say I don't want to talk about it, or I can just not talk about it and go. The reality is, I got quite a few things going on right now.
right.
I'm decent would probably be a way to describe how I'm doing, but at the end of the day, I'm your leader, and I'm not going to unpack all of that with you in this moment because I have other people that I do unpack that with. And so I think the big thing in leadership is learning how to be authentic
Yeah.
and knowing which environments you can be transparent in. Because I've seen as a pastor that there are times where my realness can become a stumbling block for somebody else. Like and it shouldn't shock you that your pastor sins, right?
Yeah.
And there are sins that pastors commit that they should be removed from their
Absolutely.
leadership.
Yeah.
But like, hey, I got angry when somebody cut me off in traffic, right?
Yeah.
Those are very normal things. And sometimes in that transparency side of things, people just can't handle that from their leader. And so I think it's learning how to be real, but not like transparent in the right environments.
Right.
And what a great leadership lesson to be able to operate with enough self-control to where you don't have to tell everybody everything all the time. Because most of the time, the only reason why we tell people what's going on in our lives is so that we can gain sympathy or gain favor. We can have somebody that like comes onto our side of what Paul says, our battle's not against flesh and blood. So I don't need more people on my side right now. I just kind of need to get through what I'm going through.
Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, and I think there's definitely things, even in my own life, I can relate to that, where it's like, hey, I'm not necessarily going to open up about everything. I'm definitely a little bit more of a person who tends to wear a little bit more of what I'm feeling on my sleeve. I tend to be a little bit more emotional. People catch a little bit more of my raw thoughts, sooner rather than later in certain circumstances, but it's something that I've continually been refining and working on. But even, just thinking today in some conversations I had today, there's things that, hey, I'll share. There's things that I'm going to still be authentic about, but not share at a detailed level. So I definitely get that.
Yeah. And I think the difference is, I call it leadership versus bleedership. And you're called to be a leader, not a bleeder.
Yep.
No one likes to get bled on because germs are gross, right? And when it's that transparency versus authenticity thing. If I got on stage on Sunday morning and I unpacked everything going on internally in me right now, ain't nobody getting healing from that.
No. Yeah.
All I'm doing is taking some time to bleed on you.
Yeah.
But if I say, hey, I've got a lot going on right now, but let me tell you what I'm learning. I'm not negating everything that's going on, but I'm choosing to lean into what my role is as a leader. And sometimes as a leader, you've got to keep the ball moving forward when you don't feel like it. And so I think there's other differences in leadership and bleedership, like bleeders never trust the people on their team. Leaders have genuine compassion and care for their people.
Yeah, that's good.
Bleeders feel obligated to tell everyone about how terrible their life is. Leaders choose to look over or look past the current situation they're in.
Right.
Bleeders lose all hope at the moment of crisis, where leaders grab the staff and keep it rolling. Bleeders gossip and talk badly about people who talk bad about them. Leaders know that truth will prevail.
Right.
And just move forward.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, an assessment question is, are you a leader or a bleeder?
Yeah.
And as you look at being authentic in leadership, one of the principles that we have on our team is that we don't bleed down.
Right.
So we have a 6-tier leadership pipeline at Propel Church. I think we call it a pathway.
We do. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So it would start with team members, then team leaders, team captains, coordinators, directors, and the executive team.
Yep.
So 6 levels.
Yep.
When we say we don't bleed down, as a level 6 part of the executive team, you're a director, you're a level 5. I don't bleed down to Darren.
Right.
If I'm going to bleed, I'm going to other people that are 6s,
Yep.
or I'm going to my overseers
Right.
that they're pastors that love me, that have
Right.
my best interest, and I've put them in my life for that reason.
Right.
That's who I bleed to,
Yep.
because I got to be real. I got to be
Mm-hmm.
transparent somewhere. But that's how we've kind of defined it, and I know you've been with us in
Mm-hmm.
that organizational sphere for a while. So tell me,
Yeah.
tell me some stuff about bleeding down.
Yeah, no, I think you've kind of hit a lot of the principles, but I would say the same very much holds true for me. We have, one other director at that 5 level right now, and he and I have a very close relationship, and so there's a lot of things that he and I will talk about that I would never talk about with 4s and others within the organization.
Yeah.
Likewise, obviously, when you're sitting at a level where you have a level above you, there's certainly that opportunity to be able to go and to actually have
Yeah.
those conversations and be able to I don't want to say bleed out, but like bleed up, I
Yeah,
guess.
you
Yeah,
can.
to some degree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
don't bleed down, but you can
Yeah,
bleed up.
can bleed up. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because people who are under your leadership don't know how to handle the information you're giving them,
100%. Yep.
but the people above you do.
Yeah.
And that's where I've seen so many people get hurt in leadership, is that they had a leader that bled down, and then they wondered why. Like, well, I don't know why that person's attitude changed.
Yeah.
I don't know why all of a sudden they didn't trust the organization anymore. I don't know why they lost hope in our team.
Yeah.
It's because you gave them information that they didn't know how to process, and it skewed their view of everything moving forward.
Right.
That's why we don't bleed down.
Yeah.
We bleed up because nobody understands your seat until they've sat in it.
Right. Yeah. So good. So good.
Come on.
Yeah.
And as we kind of think through that last, this last kind of thought on authentic leadership, one of the things that I think is really important, if you're going to be authentic, you've got to be self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
Authentic leadership is about being genuine and true to who God created you to be.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
There's not a better version of you as a leader that's out there.
Right.
Like, you can get better.
Yeah.
But if you think that if you just had their gifts or their talents or their personality or their makeup, you'll never be an authentic leader.
Yeah.
Authentic leadership is having the self-awareness to go, this is how I'm wired.
Yeah.
This is how I'm designed.
Yeah.
This is what I'm really good at. This is what I'm not good at. Here's the things that I feel like I bring to the table.
Right.
And you can have other people speak into that. But until you know who you are, I don't think you can thrive in leadership.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and I just had this conversation actually with one of my team today, because there are things that, again, God has uniquely wired and gifted each of us differently.
Yeah.
And you have to be confident in the giftings that God has given you. You have to know it and you have to own it, because ultimately that's what God's called you to do. Is He's called you to really embrace those gifts and use those gifts to serve Him, to build the kingdom of God. And the conversation that we had was actually something specific to worship. And it was like, hey, that's not my gifting and you know it, but I know you're gifted in it. And so I want you to own it. And, and that's something where, again, it's being able to recognize that, be confident in knowing where God has uniquely gifted you.
Yeah.
And then using that to speak into others.
Yeah. And I think the thought process, we talk about being a biblical podcast. The thought process for me changes when I understand that before the foundations of the earth, God decided that I would be in this role.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know why He picked me, but I know He picked me, and He obviously determined that my gift sets were what this organization needed most at this time.
Yeah.
That could change at any point. But until God shifts something, that's the kind of mode and movement that we operate in. And for you as a leader, take courage in that. that God strategically positioned you, that He knew your giftings before you ever stepped into the role you were in.
Yeah.
And if you don't know how you're gifted and wired, you will always struggle.
Yeah.
Because Scripture is clear that each part of the body has a unique role. Well, then let's figure out what that unique role is.
Mm-hmm.
Take some personality assessments. Think about the things that you're really good at. Think about the things that you're stressed about. Think about the problems that you see that nobody else does.
Yep.
And if you can identify those, that gives you a fast track to figuring out that unique purpose.
That's really good. Yeah, and I think it also, one of the other things that we've talked about a lot on this podcast is just making sure that we're looking for the strengths in the people we're leading
100%.
So that you can take them along in the journey.
Yeah.
And so if there are specific things that, become repetitive and become monotonous to you that somebody else thrives in, that is their unique gifting, bring them along in the journey.
Yep.
Take them with you and make sure that they understand, hey, here's how we operate. Here's how we honor well. We do things, with excellence up to, the standard that we have for our organization.
Yeah.
So critical.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Cool. You ready for our leader submitted question for this week?
Let's punch it in the face.
All right. So I actually really like this one. And as I think everybody hopefully knows at this point, if you're new with us, every single episode we take a leader submitted question.
Yeah.
And I love this. You can drop them in the comments. You can drop them to info@selahleaders.com. But this one really, I think, fits well for today's topic. How do you be real as a leader without oversharing?
Oof. There is always a temptation to overshare because a lot of times we believe that if people just had more info, they would understand us. And I think a big part of leadership is living misunderstood. So before I go into a conversation with people, like let's say, we're handling something's happened within our team.
Yep.
I've got to remove a leader, but I'm talking to people at different levels of our organization about this person. I don't have one conversation.
Right.
I sit down and I look at the situation and I really make a list of who needs to know what.
Right.
And I only give the relevant information that's necessary for that. And if you're a person that overshares a lot, I would say go back to that self-awareness piece and figure out, why do you overshare?
Mm-hmm.
Do you overshare because you don't feel heard?
Yeah.
Do you overshare because you feel misunderstood? Do you overshare because you don't feel like you're a good communicator? Do you overshare because you want people to be happy with you, or you're trying to bring unity? Like all of those things. And if it boils down to something that's, people pleasing is sinful, right? Because Paul would say, I can't please the Lord and please people at the same time. And so you just have to trace that stuff. And
Right.
I think the only way you get out of it is you fine track it. But sit down, make a list, who needs to know what, and then you knock it out. And we do that with stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Because, even when it comes to stuff with, we're building a new facility, right now, when it comes to building updates and all the intricacies of the project, it's what do my leaders need to know? What do my top financial givers need to know?
Yep.
What does our entire church need to know? And what do I need to reiterate in an email with people who are both in our church and kind of in our community, but have come and connected at some point?
Right.
All those are different people. I don't give the same information to all those.
Yep.
Because it's just not necessary.
Yeah. That's good. No, I don't really have anything to add to it. I think it's a good practical overall.
Come on.
Make that list and kind of determine who needs to know what.
Yeah, make the list, check it twice. Gonna find out if you're naughty or nice, because if you're nice, you will have subscribed and dropped a comment on this podcast. We're so grateful that you tuned in today for this episode of the Selah Leaders podcast. Like, subscribe, comment, share, and we'll see you next time. Hey, thanks so much for checking out this month's episode of the Selah Leaders podcast. Darren and I are so grateful that you chose to spend some time with us today to check it out. But do us a favor, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, comment, share it with a friend, family, or another leader in your life. It would truly make a huge difference.
Yeah, and if you'd like more information, jump over to selahleaders.com.